Okay, so today I'll talk about Planet Egypt. Planet Egypt was a gift store that we set up in 2000. Was it 2000 or 2001? Something like that. I can't remember.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. So, and I'll explain what it's all about in just a second. So the idea came to you initially, if you remember, during our honeymoon.
Wasn't necessarily a good idea. It sounded good.
It sounded good at the time, and we did a bit with it.
I thought it was
yeah. So it was his idea. It was a honeymoon. We were in Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh, sitting by the pool, as you do in your honeymoon. And Rick goes, "Why don't we open a store for Egyptian giftware?" So all the little statues and all the Egyptian stuff, and it was actually, within those years or very shortly thereafter, it started becoming a bit of a trend. It was a thing, people were liking the stuff, they were buying the gifts. It was just becoming a bit of a trend.
Well, I thought
at the
it was
time.
Cool.
Well, I thought it was cool, of course, because I'm Egyptian. That's what you think about your own culture usually.
You're biased.
I'm biased.
But I thought the stuff, like the shapes, the designs. I thought it was all trendy and cool, and I didn't see much of this stuff in Australia. So I figured it's all over there. Bring it over, flog it here, and hop on the wave of popularity of everything being Egypt. And there's all these documentaries all the time, especially on National Geographic and so forth. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to capitalize.
And of course, for me, I loved the culture. It was my culture. It was my thing. I loved seeing it. I loved selling it. I loved the idea of, helping Egypt, because I thought, well, bringing some money into Egypt, it helps kind of. You're paying back, for the country that brought me up.
That reminds me, one of the things that we've been involved in is NFPs, non-for-profits. Tala is the founder of another, business called Education.
Education is our future.
Education is our future, which is to do with Egypt. And there's a bit of a segue between that and this, but I know that's probably not what you'll talk about today. But
no.
She just said that, about helping Egypt and so forth. That's what that does. Anyway, we'll sort of throw it in.
Anyway, that's another story for another day. So, and the idea of obviously getting tax-deductible trips back to Egypt sounded like a kind of a good idea at the time.
I forgot about
probably
that.
Right? That was one of the motivators. We thought, we could put that on our bloody tax return. No one would have a problem with that. Anyway, so the next holiday we went to Egypt. For the whole 2 weeks we were there, looking around the markets and the bazaar, and doing our research, doing our product sourcing research, trying to get an understanding.
What is a bazaar?
The bazaar is, it's I don't know, the one you see in the movies where nice little alleys of hundreds of people selling little giftware and stuff like that. So like the markets,
But the thing about the bazaar is that the people selling the stuff usually are not the source. This is a very important concept. About getting to the source of who is manufacturing something. But at least by going to a place like the bazaar or a trade show or exhibition or a fair, call it what you will, this is the bazaar is open every day with thousands of exhibitors. I know you said hundreds, but really it's thousands.
Yeah, that's right.
And but they're resellers, and so getting to the heart of who's manufacturing something is part of the game of establishing the relationship in order to get the product at the right price.
So just to set the scene here, we're talking about products where the supplier there's no manufacturer's catalogs, there's no catalogs with specifications and sizes and shapes and packaging cartons, and it's like none of that stuff. All of these products were being made mostly by hand or half by hand, and in very primitive, small, little workshops down little alleys. So it was probably not the easiest business to get into. I can tell you it wasn't the easiest business to get into. And we literally had to do all of that ourselves. So we were facing all these challenges. We were facing challenges where there was no professional supply chain type of situation. There was no manufacturer's catalogs. There was no standardization of anything really. Quality control was very loose. Identifying products and all of that did not really exist. So we just had to make it up as we went along, really, didn't we? I mean, we knew there was a generality of the categories of products. No one really was telling us who the manufacturers were, or, I mean, they wouldn't, would they? And there was hardly any standards in terms of what to order, what the price is. So we had to do a lot of homework. And, during that 2-week period that we did all this research, we had concluded that if we don't place our orders there and then before leaving, there would be absolutely no chance of getting this right if we just go home and then try and place orders that way. It just would not have been possible at all. Hardly anyone had fax machines even. I'll tell you why not, because there was no standardized SKUs. There was no. I know. There was no standardized SKUs. There was no standardized catalogs. A SKU, stock keeping unit, as in a way to identify a product. Mm-hmm. So all you had to do was basically point at something, and they could tell you what price it was, but there was no particular name and identification for it in order to be able to place that order in future and actually get what you think you're going to get. So we spent the last 2 days, basically we identified some of the resellers that seemed kind of sizable and kind of, half reliable and professional and so forth. And we pulled together products that we thought, they weren't telling us what was popular, what wasn't. They weren't telling us much. So it was incredibly hard to get through all of this at the time. And there was no standardized shipping cartons and packaging and all of that. So we had to figure all of that out as we went along.
And you know what they say, that half the game is in the packaging. But there was no packaging.
There was no packaging at all.
And so quality control, just on back to that point, was one of the biggest challenges of this business.
Correct.
Because just to fast forward a little bit, no two orders were necessarily the same.
Yeah. So we had to literally visually make decisions, pull the products, in one corner, take photos, within reason of those products. But the other good thing also was because my dad was in the importing distribution business of electronics and, CCTV and all of that, as I mentioned before. So he had warehousing facilities. He had, manpower, employees, etc., that he could offer up, and we would pay a fee. Obviously, I didn't want him to do us any favors,
this
really.
This only came up later.
Sure, but initially he did offer some help as well, because one of his guys was going to be checking that stuff that we ordered and getting it loaded into the container.
You could have done that, though, using a third party. This is a common practice.
Common practice. But in this case, we were lucky to have...
like an agent there acting on your behalf, and they take a clip of what it is you may pay.
In normal circumstances, you would have someone else do that. But in our circumstances, because I had people there and family there, I was able to use or leverage that capacity. So we placed our orders, we took our photos, we did the best we could within the circumstances, and then we went back home and waited for the container to arrive. Okay, so a few weeks later we had this is the other thing, we had a warehouse, if you remember, 629 Parramatta Road in Leichhardt, which is a suburb in Sydney, and that was originally your warehouse. And the front of it used to be one of your stores, one of your shops, the lighting and audio stores. And then that got moved into a much larger building, very close, but, across the road. And then we bought the warehouse next door. So we had the front of that building allocated to this business, where we would be, our offices were in the building next door. We actually put a hole through the two buildings so we could walk in and out through between the two buildings. We fixed that up, of course, at the end. but that helped us leverage our capacity and leverage the building. So a part of that building plus a part of the back of it was to do with this business, and the rest was to do the other business. And then the container arrives, and the container had, most of it was the products, or a good chunk of it was the products that we bought, but also it contained some marble and granite. I mentioned before that my mum's business was and it still is factory manufacturing marble and granite, tiles and statues and so forth. And we had our own order in that to cover the floor of the new store. And it had this really nice, you'll remember this, it's really nice carved out panel. I can't remember how big it was, like at least 1.5 meters or so by about 1 meter. And it was made using a CNC machine, which is, it basically traces the shape of the logo. But it arrived in about 6 or 7 pieces. It was broken. So that was a bit.
But that only added to the character when it was laid.
Yeah, exactly. So there was no time to get another one made, and it would have been a waste of time and waiting around and so forth. So we actually decided to use it as it is, and put it there in pieces, and sealed it so it looked like it was this restored temple or something. Actually, it worked really well for that. So opportunities, sometimes bad things happen, but they turn into opportunities and actually end up improving the outcome. So anyway, we had already lined up all these, flyers and brochures and all of that, and started sending out in the area and putting, ads and so forth. Then came the bigger, really, the next step of the process, which is trying to standardize things so that the next time we place an order, we knew that we would get what we asked for. So we went through cataloging everything, taking photos of everything, taking measurements of everything, weights, dimensions, sizes, all of that, of all the products, and created a catalog. And I've actually got the catalog here.
We had to.
That's this catalog here.
Well, I didn't, but you had to coordinate to create systems and processes for each of the individual items so that they could be identified. And if you can't get those goods from one supplier, you've got to get them from another supplier. So what we're talking about now is a startup. It's a startup which is in the giftware industry, and every nuance that you could imagine. This is an importer and a distributor. So
we ended up wholesale. Initially, we were just retailing, but it didn't take long. And we had all the products laid out, and each product had what it was made of, and who it was, and all of that. And basically, this thing became a reference library for so many.
It became
for us
industry,
anyway.
Using all the knowledge that we had from the previous businesses, which we mentioned, just only touched on in the previous episodes, all of that knowledge is completely transferable to this industry. And that's I think is a key lesson in this. So when you look at this catalog, you go to the center of it. I remember this says here about store within a store. So we're actually framing the idea of, and it says there, dealerships, franchises and dealerships available. And we created a cabinet to put stores, little mini stores inside other people's stores. So they buy into the brand. We had you've got a mail order concept system here, all the terms and conditions, payment plans, and so forth. And there's the T's and C's. But this would rip out from the center, and it would be available to be used under white labeling for the dealers to be using this catalog. They'd have a small sample of some of the products in their stores, and they'd put their sticker and details on the back of it and became their catalog. And I think you had prices,
Yeah, we had prices.
So these prices became standardised industry prices across Australia. So what we're talking about is the idea of taking just that thought process on our honeymoon and turning it all the way into a importing, distribution, retail business, which needs to, be thinking about how it is it's going to even exhibit at a trade show. On the inside back cover, it talks about a charity fund, and it shows the inside of some of the factories that are actually manufacturing the goods down here on the back inside cover. Anyway, I'll let you keep talking.
Yeah, thank you. So with this catalog, by the way, I don't know if you remember this or not, but this turned into almost an industry reference book. Years later, even after I've sold the business, we go back to Egypt for visits and the like, and I walk into one of the shops, and there's my catalog sitting on their counter. You remember that? I don't know if you were with me at the time. And I'm going, where'd you get that from? And he goes, I don't know, catalog. And I had to take a while to convince him that it was my catalog. I had to show him my picture in the inside front cover. But that's the power of standardization and having that knowledge and having that reference place. So that was incredibly important. Of course, later on we set up a website. I think it was 2003, 2004. We set up a website, and catalogs weren't a thing anymore, but it was still a thing in Egypt, mind you. Transition to the whole website. We've been through 2 or 3 websites.
I still think there's a lot of value in having.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Which people would prefer to flick through. So don't think that in my view.
Yeah, it's not over. I agree with that.
I still like the printed catalogue. There was something I was going to mention in here. I forget what it was. But you've got this on the very inside front cover. You've got about the money back guarantee, and all these things we'll talk about in later episodes. How important having a money back guarantee instantly will increase your conversions. So a big thing about this catalogue and that inside section I was talking about before is mail order. So mail order is a big thing.
It's replaced today by obviously e-commerce and website orders and the like. But at the time, it was just mail or fax order.
Correct. Yeah.
That's how you placed orders.
Yeah.
Very quickly we went through into a wholesale situation.
Sorry, I just remember what I wanted to say.
Yep.
That point was everything Egyptian under the stars was the punchline.
Oh yeah, tagline.
Everything Egyptian under the stars, and a number of TV ads were made.
Yes, we did.
There was a show reel made. It made the press. It became, I think, very quickly perceived to be the market leader and the at least in Australia the industry standard, and that punchline became almost famous. And I remember the TV ads. They were 15-second ads.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, basing the strategies of previous business successes that we've had in different ideas. And one of them was to have more ads for a shorter period to help grow the brand and to get interest. Anyway, that's my 2 bolts worth.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, our first, or immediately within a few months, or probably within 6 or 7 months after we started the retail store, we really immediately went to the thought of exhibiting at trade shows, especially the gift fair and other similar trade shows. But the gift fair was one of the biggest, or the biggest actually. Our objective was to get it out there. A wholesale business, really, I like wholesale businesses more. In some ways, I like wholesale businesses much more than retail businesses. Retail business, you have to have premises, you have to have staff there through weekends usually, etc., and it's a more demanding situation, and customers are a bit more casual than a wholesale business. Wholesale business is great. I love the wholesale business idea, is that you have X number of customers and they just keep on coming back and coming back and coming back. As long as you don't mess them around or piss them off, then you can keep them,
so
right?
We're talking B2B.
Yeah, so business
as
to
opposed
business.
To when you hear B2B, that's business to business, as opposed to B2C, which is business to customer, which is the end user.
Correct. And basically our customers in that wholesale division were, they want homewares, stores. There were some of them were furniture stores for the bigger items, especially, and the small homewares. Some gift shops. There we had. We also had some of those like holistic healing / I don't know, ancient culture type audiences, which is not exactly,
but tobacco shops.
Even tobacco shops, would you believe? Yes. However, whoever was looking for that kind of product, and it was in trend, in vogue at the time. Alternative, yeah. We serviced all of those. The other thing that we gained from the gift fair as well, and that was a side benefit from doing the gift fairs, is that we bought a lot of products locally, because as the trend was growing, if you remember, we bought some products that also serviced those same audiences to sell on our website and in our retail stores ourselves. And we had some sub-distribution as well, if you remember. So we went on to some of the suppliers, the importers that were importing into Australia, and we did some deals with them. We would be buying more than the average
just on this point,
store.
When what you're talking about though is not from Egypt. You're talking about
they were from China.
So you didn't have those deals with China.
Correct.
So
our business through this was all through Egypt. Not that we couldn't have done it, but really, we didn't have to be everything for everyone. We just had our little niche, and we wanted to make sure that we covered that niche, which was the genuine Egyptian handmade, yada yada yada. But also, we did not want to have to carry too many lines, because that quite often becomes a distraction. At the same time, though, China was starting to come out with their own versions of Egyptian products. They started off with the really big, large statues, if you remember, and they were popping up everywhere. And then the next wave was the Chinese copies of the Egyptian little statues that we had, and that, however, they looked considerably better than the Egyptian versions, simply because they had production lines and quality control and everything else, and nice, beautiful packaging, and they were colored nicely, and that started becoming a big, really a big challenge for us to compete with that. I mean, there's always someone who wants the genuine, the real thing, the handmade, but the majority of people were actually heading more or leaning more towards the prettier looking one, the more perfect one, and the Egyptian handmade one was, it was hardly a case where two actually looked the same, and they just didn't look as pretty as the beautifully colored one.
On that point, we introduced a new narrative, which was around handmade in Egypt, to give the authentic item some kind of character edge, if you will, as opposed to the mass production. I guess it's a bit like, the Maserati versus Toyota. Mind you, that's probably not a good example because the Toyotas go forever, but it's a different principle. So anyway, so I guess, just to recap on a couple of things, we ended up with, the one major store, and I think it was about six of the smaller stores. Some of them were within, were our own, like owned by us and run by us, and others were licensees, and they used the same catalog and so forth. That doesn't include.
But that's separate from the dealers. Correct. This is separate from the dealers that were just buying the product, selling it on their floor. And I guess what I wanted to say is that we really need to always be looking for, and this is one thing that we always look for, you know, in any businesses that we're running or that's looking to start, is there potential for scaling, you know, either replicating the retail experience in this case, which was a retail store, or replicating the experience full stop by wholesaling it to others. And that's quite scalable. A wholesale business is very scalable as long as you can fund it. And importing businesses are one of the hardest things to fund, and I'll talk about that in another episode, because that's just cash flow is an absolute bummer when it comes to importing businesses. But we'll come back to that. So back to the challenges. So China was coming in. You know, we're not the first industry that has been challenged by China. And
well,
clearly,
essentially, it was disruption to the original items coming out of Egypt. It wasn't. We weren't the only. You weren't the only ones.
Correct.
We weren't the only ones, rather, doing and importing products out of Egypt.
Correct.
So,
but the rest were like smaller operators that you'd expect.
We immediately, within a matter of a few months, became the market leader compared to the other players. But nonetheless, all of those that were bringing products in from Egypt were being disrupted
had the same problem
by the mass production, high quality control was the big challenge on the items coming out of Egypt. And that wasn't the issue for the stuff coming out of China. So are you going to be telling the story about how the stuff from China was then being copied and being sold
well,
Egypt?
That's the funny thing, because they looked so pretty and all the nice colors and everything that would, you know, in the statues that they made in China, the Egyptians started making their own copies of the copies, which was, you know, far stretch, because it wasn't really achieving all that much. They looked a little bit prettier, but they didn't really have the perfection of the manufacturing and so forth. So
even in Egypt, the Chinese copies were showing up.
Oh yeah, they were selling in Egypt themselves.
And then some of the Egyptian vendors were trying to then resell them back to us, if you will. So the Chinese copies,
we're closer to China than Egypt, so that didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Anyway, you get the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, you know, I guess one thing, we were selling those as well. We did not really try to push too hard. If people were asking for the product, we brought it in. We didn't import it ourselves, but we got it from local suppliers. And then after a while, the trend starts going down, not helped by the bastardization of, you know, the product by the Chinese. And frankly, I mean, you were super busy, and I was already busy enough in our other businesses, lighting and audio and so forth, to really try too hard. We had at the time, 60, 70, 80 staff, and growing over those years. To the point where I just did not have the bandwidth or the time to try, you know, to grow the dealer network and so forth. So we decided to sell it. At that time, we had a wholesale business. We had a website that was doing really well, and we just sold it to a couple that were really right into all the Egyptian stuff, which made sense. And we sold that basically with a supply chain. We had suppliers that were, you know, reliable, that did well with quality, and we had you know, at least our people in Egypt that could help get them onto those supplies, and they took that. I think, what was it, 2008?
I'm not sure.
Or so. So I think it was like
GFC or after it. Might have been before.
I think around 2008 from memory. That's when I sold the business at the time, and I just moved on. I didn't see that as an ongoing outcome for me. So basically, that's, you know, it was a good 8 years of an experience, and I liked it. I liked the fact that I was able to do something, get the Egyptian products out there, give it a bit of a chance. Maybe one day I'll do it again in one way or the other.
I don't think so.
Not exactly the same. No. I have other ideas, though. You don't know that.
So, I mean,
anyway,
this was an idea that was very quickly converted into a business relying upon, look, it was Richard Branson that once said, if you can run one business well, you can run any business well.
That's true.
And as we said in the previous episodes, and it's been brought up again here, we've been involved in so many different businesses and different industry categories, but no matter how you boil it down, the same stuff that was used to run those other businesses successfully has been deployed and implemented in running this business. There's very little difference except for, in this case, it was, and you've got to be very careful because there was obviously a passion there from both of us for different reasons around the product range and the history. But at the end of the day, when not so much the writing was on the wall, but for the business, but in terms of where we were at and so forth, it was better to cash out and sell that business to be able to, because as time was marching forward with all of the disruption and the copies, the market had become very saturated. So given the amount of work that it would have needed to be able to, look, if we had put all of our efforts into this, we certainly would have been able to make this business, even with all that disruption, be able to combat that one way, shape,
That's
form
true, because there's always, a percentage of people who are very interested in the product and the culture and so forth. And if we had put more effort into it and had more time and so forth, we would have tried to reach those people in whichever, wherever they are and wherever they were. But frankly, it just did not rate on our list at the time, and we just decided that's enough. Let's just move on.
So I think that, the lesson is that sometimes if you've got a business that's being that disrupted, and you've got your own disruptions as well, sometimes you're better off just letting go and
focusing. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough, Rick, as well. We've been through this many times where the more things we had on at the same time, the worse off we were because we just did not focus. There's no such thing as multitasking. When people say, "Oh, multitask," I found out soon enough that multitasking is not a thing. Really, it's not. And we're still guilty of it, would you believe? We're still doing it.
When you say multitasking, though,
I'm just, this is in a more grandiose
sense. You're talking about having 1,000 businesses.
Right, that's right. Yeah. We're not talking about, two businesses. Two businesses for us right now is focus. That's what I call super laser focus.
In fact, there's more than two businesses.
There's actually more than two, that's right. But I'm just saying, I would like for it just to be two, yes? Please?
It ain't two yet.
We're both guilty of this all the time.
All right. Have you finished with your Planet Egypt story?
I guess I'm finished with my Planet Egypt story.
If you're looking for Egyptian products, goods, services, tours, we're not the guys.
We can't help you anymore.
So hopefully there was a couple of lessons in there that you can take away. And until next time, we'll see you then.
See you next time. Bye.